not the panel we were hoping to host. Well, good afternoon. What a great crowd. If I sound a bit nervous, because I am, I see some of the smartest minds in the industry here, sharpest minds in the industry gathering here in this room. And I know you have a ton of choice, some competing events, so thank you for making the time. And we'll be sure to make it worth your while with this stellar panel of 17 speakers, newsroom leaders, media and innovation experts, and investigative journalists from across the world who've come together to explore ways forward for creating equitable, sustainable media support amid the myriad crises that have gripped public interest journalism. And today we have over 20 nationalities represented between our speakers, our team at Report for the World, our several regional organizational partners. So I think we span South, Southeast, and Western Asia, East, West, and Southern Africa, the Mediterranean, the Eastern European neighborhood, Central and Latin America, and of course our colleagues at our sister program, Report for America in the United States. And that is a core mission at Report for the World, to increase diversity and representation within newsrooms, within the journalism sector, and at global conferences. And so these are short talks. Each panelist gets 5 minutes, which means 2.5 minutes and 2 responses, unless you want to make that 2 and leave some space for answers in the very end. Not that I'm keeping tabs, but if I start hovering, it means that you should start wrapping up the panel. And so the very first talk jumps straight to the heart of the theme. And Eli, I'm so glad that you're moderating this panel. We just decided that OCCRP, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, I said it for you so you don't have to, supports at least 71 member newsrooms and community centers across the globe. And so you're quite well positioned to talk about building journalism ground up with this stellar panel, 3 powerhouses that run journalism in Africa, Asia, and the Arabic-speaking world. So take it away.
How's it going? We can conserve time here. Oh, there's the mic. So yeah, just we'll go around from left to right here. And I'll just keep it simple with one question. So what is one way we can strengthen our respective regional media hubs amidst these turbulent times? So just 5 minutes each, and I'll nudge you if you're going over here.
Thanks, Eli. So my name is Dinesh Balliah, and I do not run journalism in the Global South or in South Africa, but I run an organization called the Wits Center for Journalism, which is an academic and research program. I have to pay the bills, and it runs alongside our professional journalism projects. Our mission is very, very simple, and I'm sorry that I'm rushing, but it is to strengthen and develop high-quality, evidence-based public interest journalism wherever it finds its place. And I say that very deliberately because journalism now is very quickly moving out of newsrooms, and we need to acknowledge that point. This year, we've created what we call the African Investigative Journalism Network. It's out of our African Investigative Journalism Conference, which is an annual conference run alongside the Global Investigative Journalism Conference. It brings together, it is the largest of its kind on the continent. It brings together over 400 to 500 investigative journalists on the continent and from around the world to collaborate with each other. Our network has been formed to intentionally push collaboration, and that's my message, and in response to your question. And by that I mean that we're not just talking about it amongst ourselves anymore, we're pushing collaboration with our conversations, or in our conversations with our funders. We're asking for them to support that. We're making sure that the people that we work with are introduced to each other. We're identifying projects that can be done or operationalized through collaboration. And we're making space, really, as the young people like to say, for cross-border collaboration in particular. But beyond that, on a very logistical level, we're also asking all of our networks, all of our organizations, all of the people that we work with to ensure that larger media organizations are working collaboratively with community media organizations. There is a huge gap. We're going back to the ground. We're going back to the local newspapermen and women who wants to tell news in their communities. And we have people with specialized skills in larger newsrooms. Eli, are you moving? Who have the skills to impart to those smaller newsrooms, to those smaller individuals and smaller organizations. Colleagues, we have nothing to lose by choosing to work together. That's an important message. We've tried pretty much everything. I do want to say that I see journalism moving into a very, very specialized space. I think that much like doctors, we're becoming special in that way, and that's not from us feeling like we're important, but that's really what the world requires now. People like us who can make sense of very complicated information produced in very highly technical ways that the average human being can't make sense of. And so that puts us in a very privileged position and a position of responsibility. I'll stop there.
My turn?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm Reyes. I am the country program manager in the Philippines of International. Oh, sorry. Hello. Yeah. Okay. My time starts now, right? I'm Reyes. I'm a country program manager for the Philippines of International Media Support. We're a media development organization. We work in countries where the media or journalism is at risk, and arguably everywhere, that's the case, right? I'm seeing some colleagues here. So I work with the Asia department, and I work closely with other countries where we have programs in the region. So as to the question, how can we strengthen support for our regional journalism hubs? I have two concrete areas that I'm thinking I'm coming up with. One is funding. So we've been noticing that funding support for journalism has been dwindling over the years, and we've been thinking about ways to support journalism outside of the funds from the West. And it has been accelerated only by this USAID freeze. So in the Philippines, we are working on a public journalism fund, and it's all about unlocking local capital. There is another session in the coming days where that will be discussed in more detail. But we at IMS, for example, in the Philippines, that's what we're doing, relying on the private sector, local charity, so that we're not as so dependent on Western funding. But also in other countries, in our other program countries such as Indonesia, they're also very strong on local support from the private sector, from local charity. So that's what we can probably experiment on. And another one is on innovation. The Philippines is ground zero for, not proud of this, but it's considered the patient zero of disinformation, and it's also one of the biggest consumers of social media in the world, especially Facebook and now also on TikTok. So disinformation spreads so fast. What we have been doing is finding ways to innovate, to reach younger audiences, and that's working with content creators, and that also brought with it a lot of other issues. So content creators are also now being targeted because they're now working in the public interest space. And we've discovered that we can engage more effectively with tech companies, with the platforms, especially TikTok, on the country and regional level as opposed to the global level. And that's what we're doing also, because it's easier, they're more responsive that way. So we're working now in the Philippines. We will be working with our Indonesian counterparts, and hopefully we can work with them to engage these platforms where disinformation spreads, and also on the safety of our partners. So those are two that I can share right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Preethi. Thanks for the Reporter of the World, and thanks for being here, all of you. It's no longer business as usual. My name is Rawan Damen, and I'm the Director General of ARIJ, Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism. We have been for 20 years working in the MENA region in all Arab-speaking countries, supporting investigative journalists and fact-checkers in the region. Unfortunately, we have been in the 18 months trying to support the Palestinian journalists in Gaza, where this proved that there's no safety for journalists. And we are so worried about people looking at this as if we can stop speaking about this and saying that we need to stop this. As a regional organization, we couldn't support our Palestinian journalists in Gaza without collaborating with Reporters of the World, RSF, Reporters Without Borders, and CPJ, Committee to Protect Journalists, and others. So the regional level to support any part that is going under genocide and Israel targeting Palestinian journalists in Gaza, you need the regional support and the international support to keep this pushing, even if we, until today, cannot stop targeting and killing journalists and civilians in Gaza, in Palestine. For a regional support, we managed to connect Palestinian fact-checkers in Gaza and the West Bank with Arab fact-checkers, with international fact-checkers, to combat disinformation that has been going in many different languages across what's happening in Palestine and Lebanon. And we have in the room our colleague Huda Uthman, who's the executive editor of ARIJ. Huda, please raise your hand. And she led from ARIJ our Gaza project investigations. There is a panel that will talk about this Friday at 4 p.m. And ARIJ reporters from all over the Arab world supported this work, but we couldn't do it. We could do it only in Arabic language, and we couldn't do it without the expertise of Forbidden Stories in France, Guardian in the UK, Paper Trail in Germany, France 24, AFP. The last 10 days, we published the second bunch of Gaza Project, and Bellingcat were with us. So there's no way we can nowadays say a national level is enough. Unfortunately, with what's happening in the States, the United States has become a hostile environment for journalists. I'm in journalism for 25 years. I have never imagined that I will say this sentence. It's not Yemen, not Palestine, not Lebanon, but the United States has been a hostile environment for journalists. If we stop working together, collaborating together, there will be no journalism anymore. I'm so afraid of what's happening these days. There's no way we can say that it's business as usual, because it's not. We supported fact-checkers in Tunisia last October, and unfortunately, when the elections happened, there was a cyber law that prohibited fact-checkers from publishing anything in Tunisia during the elections. We ended up publishing that content that the Tunisian fact-checkers did in Libya, Algeria, and Egypt. Regional solutions, how we can really adapt to the environment we are in, how we can collaborate together and support each other. And remember that if we stop and accept injustice anywhere and targeting and suppression of journalists, it will come home. It will come to Italy, it will come to Canada, it will come to Australia, it will come everywhere if we stop saying that what is happening these days is completely wrong and it's against all accountability and democracy we have been raised to believe that we should work upon. We have our regional conference. It's ARIJ 18th annual forum that's happening in Jordan, and it's the only independent media conference that has been in the region going on for 18 years. If you would like to collaborate with the best investigative journalists and fact-checkers, Arabic speaking, just come in person. It's the first weekend of December every year. It's from 5th to 7th of December this year, and there is an online version. We can do it, but please be with us all. Thank you very much.
I think we're still pretty good on time, no? We were economical. I would just want to say I certainly would like to collaborate. So you have one person but yeah, just to open it up a little bit, because we were talking a little bit more about fragmented regional hubs here, but we all met. Well, we've never actually met in person, which is pretty remarkable given the small world that journalism and especially investigative journalism is. So I guess my question to you is, I heard Dinesh as well mention cross-border work as well. So basically, you know, as ideally your regional hubs are strengthened, how would you propose working together across regions? This is just a plug as well for, you know, cross-regional, cross-network investigative journalism and journalism at large, which is what my organization does as well. So, maybe about a minute each, and I'll just wave my hand.
Sure. So I think I'm going to plug Report for the World here for a second, because I think that's the kind of model that, you know, is one of the ways in which we can address this problem. And if people don't know the model too well, the Report for the World, you know, places people, raises the funds to place those individuals in newsrooms across the world. But what's critical about it is that there is a common base, there is a common understanding of who those individuals are, their skill sets and so on. And so there's opportunity there for ensuring that you're growing up a regional cohort of individuals to service those newsrooms. So I'll leave it there, but I think that's one model in which we can address this particular problem.
I think what we're doing right now is also capacity building. So we've started doing joint capacity building of journalists, especially on investigative journalism, across Southeast Asia. We just finished one on climate reporting and constructive journalism. And then it's a good way of, you know, building a cohort of trainers, not only investigative journalists, but also trainers who can sustain the momentum in the individual countries.
We are all under attack. If you are working on climate change and environment, all genders, on fact-checking, on independent media, we are under attack. We should behave in that model. I think meeting in Perugia, all of those people together, we need to find ways to fight back and fight in different ways. We have never been under attack as much as we are today. And this is why we are all together, and there is a wealth of knowledge in this room and in the festival that we can come up with different models than what we used to do.
Well, thank you. That was incredible. I think, are we out of time? It's unfortunate that we have to.
I think we're going to
stop it
have
here,
to phase you out while the new
bye.
group comes in. Really thanks to all of you, and
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And just to answer Dinesh's point, thank you for explaining what Report for the World does. I was going to get around to it. We've taken a lot of the wisdom from our regional partners who just spoke to look at getting deeper into certain parts of the world. For example, South Asia, where we want to bring together our Indian and Pakistani newsrooms and add newsrooms from Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka for deeper cross-border exchange. Similarly, in the Mediterranean, to bring the Southern European newsrooms closer to those in the Levant, in Maghreb, on common issues such as climate, economy, labor, and migration. And we're also thankful to our regional networks for helping us source and support locally driven innovation. And Sannuta, you have been at the helm of the Scroll, leading the AI and media innovation efforts. And a lot of the products, services, and the story formats that you're designing are exactly the sort of innovation that Democracy Forward at Microsoft and Newspack would want to support. So I'll let you take it away in terms of introducing these fantastic panelists, but also giving us a bit of the lay of the land in terms of small media innovation. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So across the global majority, small and under-resourced teams are really driving the most creative and high-impact journalism. All of us agree with this. We know this for a fact. Often with limited tools, but very, very powerful ideas, right? At my own newsroom, we're a tiny, tiny newsroom in India, and we're building an in-house text-to-interface tool to version articles across formats and multiple languages, and we're proud to say that it's working. We've tested it with users, very small bit of users, but it's working. And we're one of those few tested use cases where AI innovation, strategy, sustainability are aligning. But we also recognize that, we are among the exceptions here and not the norm. And elsewhere, brilliant teams are experimenting with AI-assisted workflows, but what holds them back isn't ambition. It's the absence of shared infrastructure, support systems, meaningful collaboration like the earlier panel just spoke about, and strategic alignment. Our experience shows us what's possible when the right conditions are in place. So the real question here is, how do we make this the rule and not the outlier? And to talk about this in much more detail, we have Kim Bode, who runs the Revenue Development Program at Newspack, and of course Noreen Gillespie, who's the Journalism Director at Microsoft. Let's jump right into it. We'll go 2 questions each, and we'll see how much time we have after that. Starting with Kim, why do you think infrastructure, so when it comes to tech, support, and the process, is often the missing piece in journalism innovation today?
Yeah, thanks, by the way, also for having me here. I think I'm really humbled to be part of this conversation after this wonderful panel before us. Infrastructure, I think, is maybe not a super sexy topic, but I see it in our work. It is so important because it is the foundation for innovation. We have about almost 300 publishers on our platform, Newspack. I run the Revenue Development Program, which essentially teaches them how to use our tools for optimization of their website to generate revenue, right? It's called Revenue Development Program. And so what we oftentimes see is that, newsrooms have, sort of like a shaky tech stack. The team can be really overwhelmed. Oftentimes, especially smaller newsrooms are founded by journalists. They're not business people. They're not technologists. They're not marketers. But all these things need to be in place in order to be sustainable, obviously make money, because without money you can't do these wonderful, important investigations that the panel ahead of us was just highlighting, right? Infrastructure is the foundation for innovation, I argue. And that's really, in our case, combining the technical infrastructure, that's Newspack, as well as the strategies that we know work, so like proven practices, and then the processes in place. So really kind of like corral them around how we can drive impact fast and at scale.
You brought up money, which is everyone in this room will agree. It's a bit of a touchy subject. And, and Noreen, I want to bring you in here, where every bit of money that comes into journalism, right, to each of our newsrooms, we sort of divert it to doing more journalism, right? And like cost is a big barrier. Innovation becomes the second priority. What needs to happen realistically, and I underline realistically, for innovation to not be sacrificed?
It's a really great question, and again, thank you so much for having me here today. If you had asked me a year and a half ago what AI adoption and innovation would look like across the industry, I would have told you that I thought big organizations, well-resourced organizations would sprint, and smaller organizations would struggle to keep up. And to a degree, that has played out, but not always. And I think one thing that's important to remember about innovation is that it can happen out of necessity or it can happen out of resource. And I think as we look at the globe, as we look at places that have been successful at adopting AI and really driving it towards outcomes in their news organizations, you've really seen both things happen, right? So it's tough to kind of say, this is the one way innovation happens. And ideally, there should be lots of different ways that these tools are adopted. But there have been some commonalities with smaller news organizations, local news organizations on their adoption journey. We're doing 2 big projects right now, one with the Lenfest Institute for Journalism in the United States and another with the Thomson Reuters Foundation in South Africa. And across those 2 programs, as those support groups went out and looked at the conditions that they were walking into when they were trying to drive change, They found a couple of things. One, cost. It's not just affording the tools, but it's what tools you can afford and what outcomes they drive, right? There's been a lot of fear about incorporating tools that may not be safe, may not be accurate, may not be around for the next couple of years. So there's a big desire to not just adopt technology, but adopt reliable technology and build the skills to be able to recognize what that looks like. We're also finding in a lot of places, not unsurprisingly, that journalists already are using AI in various ways, but maybe the policies and strategies are lagging in those news organizations. So there's not clarity between the workforce and the organization as a whole about how this is going to be used, when this is going to be used, what guardrails are in place. So how do you solve that problem? To me, it's an issue of partnerships between journalists themselves, news organizations, journalism support organizations, tech companies, and philanthropy where appropriate, right? And I think that we need a diversity of stakeholders in that space. Academia has a role to play here too, because we can't over-rely on any one sector, because business imperatives are changing, philanthropic motivations are changing, news organizations themselves are changing, and the use cases for AI will change. So I think the more diverse stakeholders you can bring into that group, you've got a better chance of setting up a infrastructure that will survive.
Wonderful. How are we on time?
Doing marvelously.
Wonderful.
We still have some time.
I just thought we'd talk about another sort of problem that I think all of us acknowledge, but we refuse to do anything about it, which is we all work in silos. And, and I look at AI very closely, and many of us are reinventing the wheel again and again and again at our own organizations, right? Again, what systems do we need for better collaboration? I think the theme of this festival probably, and even a lot of our panels, is going to be collaboration. So we are going to keep talking about it again and again, I think. But times are such. What can we do for a better collaboration? What do we exactly need to put in place for newsroom to newsroom collaboration? And how do we go about it? This is for both of you.
I can start. I mean, I think, come back to my sexy topic, infrastructure. We see this there already, right? So it doesn't even need to be these flashy things. It is really just like getting the basics in place, like have your website set up in a way where your newsletter is front and center so people can find it, right? Like how do you make sure that people know how to donate to you, how to give you money, how to optimize for ads if that's part of your business model, right? There are proven practices. There's great training programs out there and knowledge, and there's so many resources online that you can follow and you can read, but then it's oftentimes not prioritized in organizations. Coming back to not reinventing the wheel, it's really thinking about like what is working in terms of processes, strategies, and product, and then looking at touching as many folks as possible with it, right? And then along the way, actually innovation can happen, right? So if it's like about something that is rather standard, but honestly, I can see like what is considered standard oftentimes isn't in place or isn't optimized. So once newsrooms start thinking about that and putting just a little bit of time aside, and get a little bit of guidance, they can go really far, and then they start to innovate, and then they start to experiment, and they're like, because they know their organization, their audiences best, and it's really interesting what can come out of that, right? And so I think that just as well applies to new technology. It's like, do you actually have the right processes in place that are focused on driving outcome versus just moving things from A to B? Not to discredit anyone's efforts. I think everyone really comes in with at least the right heart, but we do have to be outcome oriented, even more so when money is sparse. So one of the things that we're looking at is the program that I lead. We've seen it work, but currently funding is only available for US-based organizations, and so I would like to bring it abroad because it works, and I think that if we find the right partners, and potentially funders as well, that's something that can help to make impact at scale and kind of like lay the foundation where innovation can happen.
So I come at this work as someone who worked in breaking news for over 2 decades, and I think within journalism, we're competitive, right? We get a scoop, we come up with a great idea, we solve the revenue problem. Are we gonna share that? I'm asking you to do that, and here's why. I think
+1.
We are in a moment where the best solutions need as much oxygen as we can give them. The best solutions need to be shared, and not just what it was. Being transparent about the things that are working with AI across the industry means a couple of things. First, it means, what was your process? How did you set the conditions in your organization, in your cohort, to put that solution into place? What obstacles did you run into along the way? What did you need to do to skill your organization to make sure that there was buy-in, that the journalists that you work with were eager or came along on that journey? And then finally, specifically, what results were you able to drive? I think the more we can be vulnerable, the more we can be open about the things that we're doing and the things that we're finding, we give an infinite number of organizations a chance to do the same. And I think this is a moment where collaboration isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And the more that those partnerships can help drive that outcome, the better off we'll be.
And also, if I just may jump in there, also what doesn't work, right? I mean, this is even harder to share, obviously. I mean, I wouldn't want to share what doesn't work. Like, my initial reaction would be that, right? But I think we got to overcome that and do share it with others, because so others don't have to make the same mistakes, right?
Failure is okay, and
Yeah.
actually really instructive.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. That's a good sort of thing to leave you guys with. But I want to leave you with one sort of hook question so that we can continue these conversations outside. Is, again, practically, if all of us in this room were to come together and build a journalism commons of sorts, right? What would we bring to it? What would we add to it? Each one of us, what could we bring? And these are conversations I think we should be having. What does a journalism commons for the industry look like? If we have the time, perfect.
I think 1, diversity of stakeholders. 2, it needs to be nimble, right? I think that creating a structure or creating a bureaucracy can be really helpful in scaling resources to places that need it. It can also sometimes inhibit the speed of innovation. So I would say creating that body is a wonderful idea, but do it in a way that can be responsive to the speed at which technology is moving.
It reminds me of a really interesting conversation I had earlier today, and maybe the person's in the room, I don't know, but it was about kind of like the conflict between depth and scale, like putting support, like how can we ensure both, right? And I think that is, for me, like a really interesting topic to think more about, how we can bring this closer together, because right now they're a little bit at odds. And I think, thinking about how we can go deep while also providing scale would be like a really good nut to crack.
Perfect. Thank you, and that was us.
So far, so good with timing. Just to, as the next group comes in, just to add to Noreen's point, we do see a lot of small public interest media, coming together much more collaboratively than large newsrooms would. And Scroll is one of our partners and has been very generous with introducing the products and services they've been designing. And Noreen, thank you for your thought partnership and also your support of this first phase, where we've looked at the needs of newsrooms, the challenges they're facing, but we're also creating peer-to-peer exchange exactly to prevent those silos, so they may learn from their successes as well as their failures, as you just mentioned, and also to create mentorship between more advanced newsrooms that would be considered innovators and those who are in nascent phases. And I've really enjoyed working with Ryan on some of that peer-to-peer network, sort of for nurturing those networks around revenue diversification. So we formulated a revenue roadmap toolkit together, which essentially charts a journey for newsrooms to start with sometimes recalibrating their value proposition, but there are others who are already, have already experimented with revenue, where we provide different options for them so that they may integrate those plans into their workflows. And so I know that you've also formed a local news network at the IPI, at the Media Innovation Unit, and you've collaborated with these speakers in different ways. So I'll let you tell us about how can we collaborate more and with deeper impact.
Great, thank you so much, Preethi, for the invitation. And I'll hope to put the theory of smart brevity into practice today in this 20 minutes. But so the question we were asked to respond to today was really about how does your model, your organizational model of collaboration meet this very specific moment that we have in front of us. To provide a little bit of context or foundation to this discussion today, I'll talk a little bit about the outcomes of a project that Report for the World and myself have been collaborating on over the last 6 months, in which we surveyed around 35 of Report for the World's organizations in the global majority. These are local and investigative publishers. And amongst other things, and you can find the results in this report on the on your way out. But I would like to focus a bit on one of the questions in the survey was specifically, what are the risks to your organization at this stage, and how are you mitigating? How are you designing products to potentially solve for those risks? But to briefly reference the risks themselves, because again, this was 6 months ago, but the number one risk was discontinuation of donor funding. We'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes with the rest of the speakers, but that is the elephant in the room right now, especially for publishers in the global majority. Financial management, so basic insights and ability to manage cash flow for the near and medium term. The competition with platforms for audience, attention, reach, referrals, so the reduction in referral traffic, a growing emerging pattern of news avoidance, and ultimately human resources. So how do you kind of keep and attract good talent in your newsrooms? And so the organizations that we have on today's panel are really working in different ways to mitigate some of these risks. We have an investigative journalism outlet who's pioneering a form of investigative collaboration. We have an impact investor working with media around the world, making sure that they can operate through tough political and economic climates, and a movement that's really investing in innovation in climate publishing around the world. And today I hope we can learn a little bit about the who and how, so what you're doing in your organizations, but also some of the tensions that you're seeing in the work you're doing to really respond to this bigger question about really decentralizing funding for the global majority. And as we respond to this elephant in the room, i.e. the major cuts to foreign aid and assistance, and the implications that has had on publishers in every corner of the world, including the United States, how are you meeting that moment in the way that you're collaborating in many different ways? So to maybe start, I think we'll go to Ariadne. She's the impact director at Lighthouse Reports, and to explore a little bit about how you're making the case to donors, to partners, to impact partners, and ultimately, what are those tensions in the work you're doing, and what lessons might there be going ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Shereen was saying something funny at the beginning of this as we were prepping, which is the poor elephant, which has really just stayed with me, the poor elephant in the room. So yeah, my name is Ariadne. I'm responsible for impact and one of the directors at Lighthouse Reports. I'm going to blast us through our model really quickly and say that a lot of my response to Ryan's question is going to echo some of the things that were said by Dinesh and Rawan on the first panel, which was hours ago at this point. So Lighthouse Reports has a kind of twin set of goals as an organization, which is that we want to innovate in the field of collaborative journalism and kind of shape the future contours of that. and also that we want to make progress on the big issues that we cover. So we're quite clear on our desire to make change with our work and to direct it in that way. It's also important to know that we are not a publisher. We are the investigative and project management team behind impact-driven journalism that appears on media partners' platforms and reaching audiences in the millions on platforms that they already know and trust and engage with. So we've worked with over 150 outlets since our inception five years ago, and collaboration. I'm going to talk about collaboration and impact as the kind of response and the things that we need right now, more of in this moment, like others have. Collaboration is core to all aspects of our model. So on the media partner side, as I just said, to deliver our findings to broad audiences and achieve broad reach. And on the impact side, which is about developing and sustaining relationships across the ecosystem of actors that are working on the issues that we cover. So that includes civil society, it includes campaigners, grassroots organizations, the affected community, policymakers, industry leaders, and anyone that is a stakeholder. And maintaining these relationships over time, not having them be kind of extractive and one-off, helps us build momentum. They help us build momentum around an investigation, expand its reach, and support our findings. So a really quick example of what this looks like in practice. Last year, we published an investigation called Poison PR, which exposed a company that was pushing harmful pesticides that are actually banned in the EU to farmers around the world, and simultaneously tracking and going after scientists and activists that were spreading the word about how bad they were and trying to curtail the use of those pesticides and the sale of them globally. So this was a sprawling multi-country investigation, and we made impact on it by focusing on specific outcomes and zeroing in on audiences where our findings could make a difference, talking to them about what they needed and engaging them with tailored findings. So for the affected community, local farmers and politicians in Kenya that didn't have information on how bad these pesticides are, our partner Africa Uncensored, I think also a report for the World Partner, with grassroots, with community organizations, farmers organizations, took the findings to farmers in Kenya with the use of a short documentary and led a conversation about their harms and alternatives. We made sure civil society and industry experts were part of the work along their way throughout the whole course of the investigation, so that their push led to the company actually losing contracts in the end, and importantly, dismantling the network of profiles of people that they were attacking that were against them. And finally, we knew also that it would resonate with diverse publics. So we reached out to influencers that have this mass reach across the political spectrum, and the investigation landed on the Joe Rogan podcast and was picked up by a number of MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, influencers, just for anyone who's not following that particular acronym, which was obviously a way to kind of break out of the usual bubble.
Great, cool. Yeah, no, this networked model is a really fascinating masterclass in making sure that the right investigations happen in the right places and actually achieve that sort of impact cycle. And I think that it's a truly pioneering approach. And at the International Press Institute, we've been a network for around 75 years of editors and publishers, and have been also exploring and thinking about ways to connect publishers and actually work together to solve some of these big picture challenges and issues. So Bilal, we've worked together in the past. Tell me a little bit more about the way you at the Media Development Investment Fund have been thinking about particularly meeting this moment, obviously setting up the infrastructure to respond to a scenario where the donor community, the philanthropic support from organizations is phased out. It's one where, in fact, this is in fact the antithesis to a potentially sustainable business model. Tell me more about how you are meeting the moment and driving impact.
Thanks. So a quick intro to MDIF. So I'm not going to repeat anything that's on the website. You can go look at the details there. But in a way, for the last, so I think we're reaching our 30th anniversary soon. And a big part of the work that we do hasn't changed in the last 30 years. You know, it's financing, it's the real pressure is on the client to be doing the innovation, but MDF is more than just the funder, right? Firstly, I want to agree with obviously all the panelists and everyone that went before, and Dinesh specifically, who we worked close on the South Africa Media Innovation Program back in 2017 already. And what we saw through bringing together a cohort of smaller independent media organizations, a big thing to overcome is this idea of looking at each other as competition, when the real competition are those outside of this room. When we end up, because I don't want to get it wrong, because competition is good, it's healthy, and I think that's a big discussion, and hopefully somewhere else at this conference this is covered about, in the context of funding cuts, the efficiencies and how, as individual organizations, how every dollar we spent is going into creating the most value. Because I think we focused a lot on, the money's coming in, how to increase revenues, how do we get more grants, and all of those are important, but often and now I'm jumping in different directions, but the thing about looking at the cost base and looking at how do we run our organizations more efficiently, both for the publishers, the media organizations, but even those of us in the media development space. So to come to the point I was making with the having organizations in this in a cohort where they can inspire and motivate and learn from each other, and the challenge of breaking this thinking down of, we need to be collaborating because the real competition are the bad actors, those outside the room, those who, while we're fighting for the scraps, are getting stronger and can make big, swift actions that have massive impacts. Whether it's politically, whether it's like what we've seen more recently with Trump and the ex-South African Musk, and so on. Yeah, I'll throw back to you, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bilal. And yeah, these questions of where and how to invest and what to invest really do respond to exactly kind of how users are interacting with their content. And this segues well into Shereen's project, so Climate Exchange. Tell us more about this movement for climate journalism that you're building, developing, and delivering. It seems like all around the world. Tell me more.
Thank you. So thanks for being here, and thanks to Preethi and Report for the World. Two favorite subjects of mine, collaboration and innovation, and they're actually at the heart of our business model. So we're part of SULI, which I'm sure some of you know, Tom and Fergus. Legends, I think, in the room, maybe. They're in here somewhere. So we're the first initiative of SULI, Climate Exchange, and it is really based, like we said, off collaboration and innovation. But the reason why it's part of our lifeblood is that we're actually quite a diverse team already that have built this. We come from a varied background. I'm actually an outlier in the room. I'm not a journalist at heart. I come from a comms background in advertising and marketing and brand building. And we've got academics on the team. We have editors, we have journalists. So we're actually like a big group of people who are building a movement, but really put collaboration. And when I say that, I mean radical collaboration at the heart. And what I mean by radical is that we're aligned with our partners on values. And so we go values first. So that's why Report for the World, they're one of our great partners. Dinesh Balliah is a partner of ours. We've got strategic alliances around the world in Asia, Africa, Europe, and soon to be LATAM. And so one of the things that we focus on is really actually how do we build climate and a climate narrative as part of a culture. So I think we've heard of the word about it's being siloed as a thing on this side. It's very complicated, it's full of data and science. Actually, it's part of culture. It's the lifeblood of everything that we live, breathe, eat. Oh, my mic isn't on. Sorry, thanks, Dinesh. See, collaboration right there, support. It's part of everything that we live, we breathe, we eat. It's art, it's science, it's politics, it's stories, it's storytelling, and it's changing the very fabric of everything that we do. And so acknowledging that and saying there's an intersectionality between culture and climate is one of the things that we drive forward. So when we work with news organizations around the world, we find this is one of the strategic elements of how do we actually do this? So it's one of the things that we offer our news organizations of actually,
how do we strategize and use some of these insights and some of these data that we have access to and put audiences at the heart? So I think news avoidance has come up quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And one of the conversations that's come up regularly for us is are actually people avoiding climate news, or are we not creating news that's relevant to them? And it's an interesting point, because for a business, as you said, you wouldn't say my product or service isn't filling a gap. You'd actually look for the gap, and you would adapt the product or service. And that leads to one of the key things that we do for innovation is we work with the local regions to come up with innovations with them, non-extractively, and we actually ask them for the challenges in the market. So we don't go in and say, we know your market so well. They tell us, and then we work together in almost like a hackathon, in a way, and coming up with new news products or services for climate. And we've done this, I think, six times around the world now, and we're so proud, because I'm so proud today to be able to share this. So one of the ones we've got is Planet Plate. It's in Indonesia. It's on its second series. It's a podcast that looks at foods that are going extinct around the world. And so they're looking now to how to move into a third series, which is around monetizing that, so potentially licensing it. And one of the exciting things about this is we've also got impact built into all of our innovation models so that we can track and see what results are actually coming out of it and if it is actually a viable product at the end of the day. The other one we've got, which is just launching this week, is called Public Editor. I've got loads of flyers. They're all at the front. I love a bit of merch. So it's called Public Editor. It's a community-based project based out of Berlin with Unbiased the News. We removed climate and we removed journalism from the question we asked Berliners, and we asked them what actually mattered to them. And then the investigators at Unbiased the News will work out how that becomes a climate story that people care about. And it's going to go onto a Kickstarter. On top of Kickstarter, actually, we're pitching for jobs. So if you want to work on the project, they're looking for writers. If you want to illustrate the project, they're looking for illustrators. So it has a whole circular element built into it. We also have collaborated with WITS on Project MAR, which is an AI tool that we're looking at in terms of how does it become a thinking partner for us in a climate narrative and looking at potential impact of climate stories. It's in the first stage, it's at research stage, and the reason why I bring this up now is because if you're interested in collaborating on it and you want to find out more about the research, really get involved in the second stage of it, getting input from all of you before we run off and do something that's not needed. We'd love your input. So there's another QR code on the flyer at the front if you want to scan that. And then the other thing that we're also launching is a innovation fund, which is launching today. And that's for smaller beta products to get to market. And there's pins and badges and stickers and QR codes at the wazoo at the front, but that's us, so yeah.
Thank you so much, Shereen. And, you know, the value of collaboration is very clearly coming out of this. And, you know, look, we're in this industry, you know, for the last decade plus have been responding to significant market failures, especially in the global majority where, you know, quality investigative journalism, you know, at a certain point benefited heavily from donor support, and exactly these types of innovations in the way programs are designed are how we as a sector think our way out of this particular moment. So with that last caveat, I would like each of you in a sentence, if you can manage that, to just send one message to publishers at this critical juncture from the perspective of your organizational mandate on how to navigate or think about this moment and think through really a path to the future of this industry. Ariadne, you are up.
Okay, it's going to be a run-on sentence. So I think one of the things that we believe at Lighthouse is that the impact-driven approach holds the potential, holds answers to one of the most serious challenges facing investigative journalism, which is that it is a luxury product for an elite audiences. And so collaborating and responding to audiences helps us get closer to meeting those audience needs and explore solutions to this challenge. And we've been involving our media partners in this exploration. So I would leave them with that message, and that collaborations are messy always, but that's okay. They're also beautiful. I also have a message for funders, because I spent the better part of my career working in philanthropy in complex contexts, and I think that it's really important in this moment to not create more donor darlings. I hope this is not too controversial, to keep your ear to the ground, to do your research and homework, to really get to understand and know your field and the work, and to kind of assess the quality of the work of many different diverse organizations based on their impact and their ability to collaborate well and across the field and even outside of journalism.
Thank you. Bilal.
One sentence. I'm not sure if
it can be run on.
Yeah, no.
No,
I mean, I think so. To add, I'm just trying to think of how to phrase this, because I think what we're good at, we all know what we're good at, and I think conferences like this, we're gonna risk maybe leaving here only high-fiving each other rather than calling out bad behavior amongst ourselves. Because when we talk about solving yes, and I think this advice for the donors is great, but you know, I've said this before, that the problem is that journalists are always the smartest people in the room. And so we think we know everything. And just in the bus on the way here, somebody said to me, oh, I heard your presentation in Gothenburg last year, but you know, I'm a journalist, and so I don't have any business background. I'm like, it's a year later, and you're still in this mindset of, I'm a journalist, I don't know about business, and so I'm going to faff around until, I don't know if that's a South Africanism or not, but I'm going to not look at the basics, because there's some basic things. You know, money's coming in, and it's spent, and then it's gone, and unless money's coming in, you're not going to pay salaries. Like, you don't need a business degree, you don't need an MBA to figure that bit out. And you can't wait for the donors to come in and not have the darlings and do better work, and you know, not just go for the fanciest AI-influenced application that they receive. I think it's also this legacy of not just because of the grant that we're funding the important work, but the nature of our industry, where we could, as radio or TV, talk at an audience. And what we said, you know, is this thing we struggle with today. You know, write a good story or do a good piece of journalism, and they will come. And then we say there's news avoidance. Nobody's reading or nobody's watching this important work that's being done. But we're not having conversations with our audiences. And I know, like many in this room already now, we're preaching to the converted, because, I mean, I see many of our clients here, and you know, many have done a good job of engaging with the audiences and getting revenue from them and diversifying. But there's still a lot of work to be done. So I hope that was useful, Ryan.
So humility is a virtue, not a vice. Shereen, take it away.
I would just say it's about relevancy. You know, just coming from an ad background, we became irrelevant. Data outwitted us, and some of the biggest brands in the world collapsed and are no longer. And I think it's borrow from other industries, learn from other industries, borrowed ideas, collaborate with people from diverse backgrounds in thinking, and look in all those unusual places for innovations and ideas. And then to exactly what Bilal was saying, I think it's around making climate news products valued and thinking of them as products and services, and expanding that diversity, and that beta's not a bad thing. Beta's there to put some seed money in, to test it, to optimize, or to quickly exit, because it's not the place we should be.
Great, thank you, Shereen. And for those interested in designing products and services, this report does get into that a little bit, as well as its previous report last year. Preethi, thank you so much for having us, and thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you. These were a lot of rich insights on collaboration, but I did look up FAF. Was that the word you used? That's informal British for spend time in ineffectual activity. So it's the Brits can take the credit for that. We use it in India too. And to Bilal's other point, I think it is a moment where we ought to collaborate to really help newsroom partners get sharper around their areas of coverage, to to really recalibrate their mission with their reduced teams, to adjust their assumptions about audience and community needs, and most importantly, to set much more concrete milestones around their revenue diversification. The other area we just touched upon, and thank you, Ariadne and Shereen, for your partnership on impact-related work. We've been working with newsrooms to basically integrate their impact planning and tracking throughout the life cycles of their deeper investigations and reporting. And so the idea is to build prompts, relevant data, and applicable tools so they can more effectively, with small, nimble teams, be able to create diverse distribution, to reformat their stories, and to map out their audiences, key stakeholders, and create more effective partnerships. And so there is one group of media, those operating within a conflict context and in exile, where this sort of impact planning becomes much more complex and in some ways convoluted. But we also see that it's these newsrooms that are also coming up with the strongest solutions and innovations. Robbie, we've been working for a while on different projects, even before Report for the World, and we're so thrilled to support a disinformation beat in your newsroom. And I know we've talked about impact around that. Now, while the Philippines is not officially considered a country in conflict, you have several conflicts across the country. So maybe you can launch this discussion on how one plans and calibrates impact in such a complex situation that is volatile but also evolving.
Okay, thank you very much, Preethi, and thank you, Preethi, and to RFW for having us here in Perugia. I'll answer that by way of trying to facilitate this conversation with our friends here on stage, because frankly, I'm humbled to be part of this panel and to listen particularly, and you'll understand later on why, as difficult as things are and as challenging as it is to be in a democracy like the Philippines. I think you'll see the context is vastly different from what we'll be discussing. Now, just by way of introducing what we'll be discussing, for those of you who are first-timers in Perugia, or if you've been here before, or if you're keeping count, or for those of you who did not know what they were walking into when they walked into this room, yes, this is the fourth panel in the past hour. And if you haven't been here, let me tell you congratulations and thank you on your behalf to RFW, because this is probably the most number of panels you'll attend over the next over the next 2 days. And I mean it. Those of you laughing knows that this is probably the most number of panelists that you'll hear. But if there's anything we want you to take away from this particular sub-panel of this 1.5 hour session, is that of everything that you will learn in the next 2 days, whether it's talking about business models or impact or innovation or investigative journalism, and challenges, certainly. You could throw all of that out of the window and still come out of here and say, I have no idea what's going on in countries like Iraq and Russia and Myanmar and in so many countries where media is actually in exile, not just in conflict but in exile. And I've spoken too much already, and I'll just throw it to our panelists and throw your question to our panelists directly. How do you actually measure impact? How do you define impact for journalists and media when you are separated from your sources, you're separated from your stringers, separated from your reporters, and for that matter, even separated from your audience? Anna? Oh, sorry. Aida, Anna Lelik is from iStories. This is an exiled media organization for Russia. And following her will be Al-Kaisy of Jumar. This is an exiled media group for Iraq.
Hello, my name is Anna. I represent a media outlet, Important Stories. This is a media outlet that is specialized in investigative journalism, and since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, our outlet is being based in exile. And one of the popular messages that propaganda and authoritarian regimes are trying to spread is that media being based in exile are irrelevant, they do not have connections with their audiences, and in the past 3 years we have seen that the audience of our media in particular is growing, and people in Russia are facing censorships and repressions against journalists, and investigative journalism based on data and on evidence has never been as important as today. In our particular case, I would share maybe a couple of directions we have been working towards. So iStory started 5 years ago as a media outlet basically focused on collaborative journalism, and when the full-scale invasion started, we leveraged our collaborative experience to investigate war crimes in Ukraine. We identified and recorded such cases as tortures in the occupied territories, killings of civilians, and deportations and abductions of children from the occupied territories. And we documented these cases, which further served as evidence for further investigations by International Criminal Court, by UN bodies and other institutions. The other direction which has shown impact of our work has been investigations of supply schemes used by the Russian authorities to import Western-produced components for arms production in Russia. And based on our investigations, based on evidences from our analysis, dozens of companies were put under European, British and American sanctions, further disrupting the supply schemes, because the components that Russia has been supplying are diverse, from spare parts for airplanes to microchips, microelectronics for missiles, and these missiles are hitting Ukraine and its population. And the third and very important direction, which brings direct impact, has been our work targeting our Russian readers, because we're publishing in Russian language, and our Russian audience is the major audience that we are targeting with our reporting. So basically, since propaganda is trying to persuade the population in Russia that exiled media are irrelevant, and covering majorly the geopolitical interests of Russia through propaganda, through television, we decided that we need to do the opposite. We need to cover real life issues of regular people, and we do it through regional videos, documentary style reports that we publish on our YouTube channel. And just to give you an example, we cover systemic issues that people, like millions of people across the country, are facing, such as lack of access to basic facilities such as centralized water supply. And such films gather millions of views and even drive further impact on the ground when the local authorities start solving the problems for the people, even if they named our media outlets as undesirable, criminalizing our work in the country, they still watch and read what we publish. So it is possible to deliver impactful journalism on the ground while not being necessarily based in the country. It's just important to leverage collaborations and respond to the needs of the local population, because to people it matters what they face every day, and they will follow the news and the media outlets that are actually covering what matters to them. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Preethi, and Report the World for letting us be here. My name is Aida Al-Kaisy. I am the co-founder of an Iraqi public interest media platform called Jamar. We We wouldn't describe ourselves as exile, although we are registered outside of Iraq. We're registered in Germany, but we operate hybrid models where we have teams based inside Iraq, across the region, and in Europe as well. We were born out of a protest movement that gained momentum in Iraq in October 2019, and which exposed the lack of available platforms for young people in Iraq, for young people to engage in, to express themselves in, and those young people who were calling for change in the protest movement in particular were isolated from the rest of the media in Iraq. So we founded this platform as a space for those young people to be able to tell their stories accurately, with facts, but also in a way that was engaging to other young people as well in Iraq. So art, design, music, Iraqi art, Iraqi design, Iraqi music is all at the heart of what we do. And that's how we've been able to engage with audiences in Iraq. 90% of our audiences are based inside Iraq. We have, over the last, we're quite young. We're in our third year of publishing. Well, we're coming up to nearly 3 years. We have looked at impact over the last 3 years as impact on the ground in Iraq. So it is about the conversations and dialogues that are happening on our platforms amongst young Iraqis about political issues, human rights issues. We cover stories from a recent law that nearly passed in the Iraqi parliament that would have legalized child marriage. We cover that from the ground, working with women's rights activists, working with MPs, working with people whose voices are not normally heard in the Iraqi media to cover those stories. We've covered the election of Trump and what that means in Iraq, because nobody else is doing that. No one's covering that from the perspective of Iraqis, and in particular young Iraqis. So we look at impact from that. We look at it from the impact of those conversations that are happening around those topics. We look at impact based on the types of people that engage on our platforms, MPs, activists. We look at impact in terms of change on the ground. We ran some stories talking about climate change, for example. We ran a number of posts and pieces which called out the cutting down of trees in major urban areas in Baghdad and the impact that was having on climate change, which stopped the cutting down of those trees. So that's how we've been measuring impact over the last 3 years. And I just want to say that in the last year, that has changed significantly. So we've been able to report in the way that we do on human rights issues, on political issues that you don't normally see in Iraq because we have been independently funded. Media in Iraq is politically captured. We are the only significant, or one of the only significant platforms in Iraq that is not captured by politicians, by parties, or by businessmen who have political interests. And we've been able to do that because so far we have received money from the international community, and that's changed. For a number of reasons, including foreign aid freezes, but also because Iraq has fallen off the priority list for many international countries and donors. So we're now having to think creatively about business opportunities. How we monetize our audiences. In Iraq, there are no options for online payment systems. There are no commercial options. Making money from businesses, that doesn't exist. The private sector is so nascent in Iraq, and also corrupt. So we are now having to think about our audiences outside of Iraq and what that means. And that then has an impact on the impact that we have in Iraq. So we are trying to think creatively, we are trying to think different, but we are thinking about impact in very different ways now.
Okay, we only have time for 1 minute responses from both of you as a final question. So I'll try to cram as much as I can into my question. Speaking as well on behalf of, like I said, other countries with exiled media, Myanmar, Korea, Africa, Latin America, every continent has exiled media. We're talking about impact because it's important as well for your funding. Basically, the funders, whether it's media development organizations, philanthropies, or private sector, or communities, they need to understand where their money is going. You talked about, the audience in Russia, the audience in Iraq. Again, speaking for the other exiles, I think it's fair to generalize that every exiled media defines their audience basically in 3 broad areas. They're your people inside the countries, those exiled, and then those people in geopolitically interested countries. in your, and that's important to your conversation about funding and your resources. So as a final question and as a challenge to the audience listening, what can these people do to magnify your impact and to make your case and to spread your story as well as to spread your mission so that funders will know to pay attention, not just your audience?
So I think probably picking up on some of the things that have been said earlier, collaboration is key, innovation is key. I'll use an example. So we launched a crowdfunding campaign about a month ago, bearing in mind 90% of our audiences are in Iraq and cannot pay, cannot give us money online. So it's been a learning exercise for us, really. We've tried, it's still ongoing. We have raised some money, and every single penny is important right now, so I'm not going to discredit it in any way. But we have had some really interesting conversations with people about match funding the crowdfunding. We've had interesting conversations with some of our more traditional donors about amplifying our crowdfunding campaign amongst their networks. So again, it's not necessarily our audiences that we're then reaching out to, but reaching out to other networks. So I think that's something that's really important that you can help us with. Another thing that we also want to think about is, and we have had these ideas about, where can we monetize? How can we monetize? And again, all of those ideas about how can we monetize outside of Iraq, And we do need to think creatively. So for example, Roby and I earlier had it was a very embryonic conversation about a national fund for media in Iraq, which is so embryonic that probably the first time anyone's ever talked about it was us today. But we want to be part of those conversations. We want to think outside of the box. We want to come up with business ideas. We have these beautiful art and designs that we've created for Jamaat. Can we sell them? All of these things, but we just need to think about how we take those steps. How do we action that? And we'd love to hear from some of the people in this room about how they've done that, or even, what options there are to even action things.
I'm also looking forward to the ideas from the crowd, to be honest. In Russia, iStories specifically was labeled as an undesirable organization, which basically criminalizes any donations from our largest audience and our most committed audience, which limits our possibilities to crowdfund, and we even restricted this ourselves. But we, of course, see some opportunities in monetizing our expertise, and we have a very tech-savvy team of reporters who are able to work with the data, and we believe there are possible collaborations with a lot of organizations interested in this part of the world, and we are open to it, but generally we have to admit that the situation is really critical and very challenging.
Okay.
Can I just say something? I think the point is we're open to taking risks, right? This is a time where we have to, like Rawan said earlier, it's critical at the moment. The situation is critical for the world. And I think that's the thing that we want, and probably that you want as well, is not to just think about it as an Iraqi media platform or our Russian media platform. This is about journalism. It's about independent media. It's about news. It's about public interest. It's about the future, all of those things, democracy, all of those things that we're talking about. So we're up for anything. We're up for trying anything that's going to make this work for the world, I think.
Okay. And on a final note, just to tie to the previous panel, talking to all the journalists who actually don't know anything about monetization, who actually can't answer this. But again, still speaking for other media, for other exiled media, I think, as a final note, when your government and your leaders say that exiled media is irrelevant, I think that's the greatest indicator that you are relevant and that you have impact. And I think one of the greatest things that fellow journalists can do is just to amplify the stories and the messages, pick it up and take notice and amplify and spread those stories and make them even more irrelevant in their countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roby, for bringing that together beautifully, and we're thrilled to support reporting roles at all three of your respective newsrooms. And I'm so sorry to only leave, such a short amount of time, but there was no way we were going to do a report for the world talk without including media in conflict and in exile, and we're continually looking for ways to increase the support exactly because those audience and service revenue models are very limited, if not impossible in some cases, and also because these newsrooms are the only sources of verified information and reporting coming out of their countries. So thank you so much for your time. And to bring all of these rich insights and steer them towards deeper value creation and creating stronger relationships with audiences and communities, I'm so glad to be joined by George and Alid, who have produced a number of insights, reports through FT strategies on ways of reaching, engaging, and creating services around audiences, and really understanding how their consumption has been changing over time. Please. And also, thank you so much for supporting the event and being responsible, especially for the aperitivo part of the evening.
Very conscious that we are the last hurdle before you all can enjoy a drink at the end of the day. There are some Q&A at the end of this, but I think we'll probably leave Q&A for the terrace where we can answer some questions and share reflections on the talks. George and I are going to run through, I guess, some of the themes that we've already been hearing a lot about. We're going to build on that. We've been collaborating with the Reuters Institute and our own data and insights practice, which builds on the themes that we've heard. Maybe Nick Newman is in the room. Some of this will be familiar to all of you. Hopefully there is some analysis which can complement the discussion that we've already had, because we work with many hundreds of news organizations around the world to support their growth, both in terms of their audience, how they structure their business, how they grow their revenues as well. We are born out of the Financial Times and its own kind of transformation journey over the last 20 years. So let me kick on quickly, and we're going to have to do a bit of a mic passing exercise here, I think. So bear with us. As I said, Q&A will leave. I think I've done the intro, so we're going to kick on to the key trends now. George, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Alid. Yes, I'm George Adelman. I'm a director and head of partnerships at FT Strategies. And I just want to take a moment also to reflect on some of those themes that I'm hearing time and time again in the panels that came before us. The first one really resonates with me. All three, actually, are central to our mission at FT Strategies. The first being collaboration. I think Noreen and Kim, you brought up straight away, and the importance of knowledge sharing, sharing resources, sharing experience. And sometimes that's experiences, not just what's gone well and what you did right, but what went wrong. And as the Financial Times, we don't claim that we got 5 minutes, okay. We don't claim that we got everything right, but we want to help others in the industry not make the same mistakes we made and fast track them to success. And the second theme that I'm hearing a lot is around audience relevancy and the importance of audience engagement, and that's at the heart of everything that we do. We want your journalism to be heard, which links to our third piece, which is where we feel we really can add even more to the conversation, which is around media sustainability and the business of journalism as well. And that's fundamental to the survival, even with this amazing philanthropic money that we see in the room. It's important that we create sustainable business models which ensure the long-term survival of the industry.
Thank you. So as I said at the beginning, this is a really quick whistle-stop tour. I think that lady said we have 5 to 10 minutes, so we will be quick. But what we're doing is building on the good work of the Reuters Digital Institute. So that's Nick Newman and the team there, Federica Cherubini. They survey many, many hundreds of leaders in the news industry. We are complementing that, and we did a session on this a few weeks ago with Nick and the team with our own data and insights practice that is building on 3 things. The News Sustainability project, which is a tool which helps organizations kind of benchmark their own archetypes for success in sustaining their business, financially speaking. So we've worked, over 800 organizations were surveyed for that piece. Similarly, we've done work with organizations around their readiness for AI and where they think it will help them. That's been a prevalent theme. And finally, we work with many organizations and can see how they are performing from a web analytics perspective. So that's quite interesting because we're going to talk about how search is being disrupted, even if from a low base you'll start to see how AI platforms are starting to inform how referrals to sites are becoming a real thing. Key trends that we'll whistle through. Okay, super quickly. The overall environment, again, a lot of this is from quantitative research, so it's the perceptions of leaders from the industry of where they think things are heading. We'll see a kind of Reuters Institute side of this, as well as an FT Strategies complement to it. Where business growth and through product innovation can lead. generative AI and using transformation, search disruption, as I said, the wider platform considerations, and finally the kind of creatification, or at least how news organizations are starting to pick up upon emerging news creators. We think 2025 and beyond is probably the year where you'll see more collaboration from legacy players with emerging voices and what lessons we can take from that. I'll kick on. This is a really quick point. I guess Nick's work on the left, each slide will have a kind of comparison, right? So the overall sentiment is the prospects for journalism are worse compared to 2-3 years ago, at least at the perception of the leaders. We think there is cause for optimism from a business perspective. Many of the leaders that we have worked with over the years think actually the next 2 to 3 years, with the consolidation of reader revenue in the market, being less exposed to advertising, particularly cyclical risks, and the loss of market share in many of the countries that we serve, means that actually there are opportunities to continue to grow news organizations that we think, when you focus on reader revenue strategies that are going to help you survive. Secondly, we think there's cause for optimism around how new technologies, and I hate to go on about AI, but how it will reduce the cost of production in certain formats which we think will increasingly become a kind of need to serve new audiences around the world. So we think there is cause for optimism. I'll pass over to George.
Thank you, Alan. I think that's a nice segue in terms of how we see the revenue mix going forward. And one of the causes for optimism, as Alan mentioned, is this focus on subscriptions and the fact that it's still seen as very important to growth, having that direct relationship with the audience and being able to own that revenue stream, even as we see display advertising and native advertising dropping. The Reuters Institute also saw the need for revenue diversification and how most participants had at least 2 to 4 revenue streams to maintain their sustainability. And obviously we're seeing upticks in funding from platforms and philanthropic support as well, which is becoming crucial to innovating and building sustainability more broadly. When we look at FT's client base, we're seeing that print decline is obviously expected to continue, but that publishers are quite confident that they can offset that with digital growth, and a lot of that confidence comes through a real focus on value over volume, focusing on increasing ARPU, improving the quality of their products, bundling, and as Alan said, other innovation like AI and using data more effectively.
Thank you. We've spoken a fair bit. I think a few people have spoken. We have 1 minute and 5 slides left. That's maybe 15 seconds per slide. We'll be quick. Left-hand side, you've got use cases that we're seeing increasingly organizations are throwing resources at. They're starting to play around with things, and we've been doing a lot of work in this area. On the right-hand side, it's a kind of sense check of optimism versus pessimism. Broadly, actually, organizations, even in editorial newsrooms, speaking as a journalist myself, people are getting much more accustomed with the idea that AI can help them save time. There are, of course, risks. We think if you are in the kind of more commoditizable end of the spectrum, less specialist, less deep, less exclusive, you will be much more further at risk compared to other players. So we think further specialism is going to be, and I think one of the other panelists spoke to it, further specialism is going to become an absolute necessity.
Yes, and Alan mentioned at the top the disruption to search. Some of the doomsday predictions regarding AI's disruption haven't materialized quite yet, but what's worrying on the right is that direct traffic is still pretty flat at 30%. So a lot of our clients, publishers are very reliant on that search, and so if it was disrupted, it would have huge consequences for their business.
I think I'm going to jump to probably the more interesting slide, given we're short on time. So on the previous slide, and as George said, you'll see search referrals across the board, and this is not just from the Reuters work, but we're looking at web analytics of many, many hundreds of organizations that we work with, are predominantly dominated by Google, right, and Facebook, and increasingly you're starting to see some of the smaller players, well, in terms of search referrals at least, pick up. Right-hand side is probably the most interesting takeaway, I guess, from this, and we do think this is a sign of things to come, and as an indicator that, I didn't show it because I had to skip past it, but news organizations are starting to put resources into being more readily available in search discovery from AI organizations, for instance, is the uptick in search from platforms like ChatGPT and Perplexity. So this is only, obviously you can see that's the small end of the spectrum, but this is from when they've started to launch their products. We think this is a sign of things to come, so organizations are going to have to start thinking through the strategies which make their news cut through that, because it's going to become harder. Final slide.
Yes, and the final trend is one you'll all be familiar with, but the rise of individual creators. But there's a certain skepticism within the industry of how that's going to play out and how to incorporate these individual contributors. But I think what these creators are doing very effectively is they're engaging in formats that audiences are responding to. They're relevant, they look and speak like their audiences, and they're meeting them where they are, which is often social first. So I thoroughly recommend the work that we did with Medill on Next Gen News as a report to follow this if you haven't read it already, but it shows some of those changing behaviors in young consumers and how news media needs to better meet them in terms of how they prefer to consume journalism.
That was it. Thank you, guys.
That was a rapid-fire presentation. Thank you, and sorry to rush you towards the end. So that, in a nutshell, or an hour and a half, was it? That's Report for the World's Community. We support critical, issue-based journalism. Come meet us in the crowd. Where is Aperitivo happening? I should know this. Just follow the people who will know where to go towards drinks, and come find us in a crowd. The 16, 17 speakers will be around, and look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much.